One sunny morning in the town of Wiggleberry, Bobby the bunny woke up with an underpants mustache on his face. "Oh no," he giggled, looking in the mirror. "They've attacked again!" Bobby wasn't like other bunnies. He had a collection of superhero underwear that he wore proudly on his head. Every morning he picked his pair like a king picks his crown. Today he chose the bright yellow ones with flying bananas. He called them Thunderpants. As he admired his banana underwear in the mirror, there was a loud knock, knock, knock at the door. It was Milo the monkey, wearing goggles and holding a spaghetti-covered notebook. "Bobby, emergency! My pants machine has gone wild." Bobby blinked. "Your what machine?" "My Pantso Launcher 3000. It was supposed to fold laundry, but now it's flinging underwear across town." Bobby gasped. "We must stop the flying undies before they hit Principal Parrot." The two friends raced outside just in time to see Miss Daisy the cow screaming, "Ah! Underwear in my teacup!" A pink polka dot pear had landed right in her hot tea. On the roof, a rooster was dancing with boxers on his head. A goat ran by, wearing a bra like a backpack. "Oh, my carrots," Bobby whispered. "This is a pants pandemic." Suddenly, Luna the llama came skipping down the road wearing a glittery tutu and singing, "Underwear here, underwear there, flying undies everywhere." She was thrilled. "It's raining undies and I love it," she declared, catching them in a basket. "Want some for your head?" "Luna," Bobby said, "this is serious. We need to find the source." Milo led them to his treehouse, where his wild invention was sparking. The Pantso Launcher 3000 was spinning out of control, shooting underpants like missiles. "I think I used too much spaghetti as fuel," Milo said. Bobby pulled a lever. Nothing. He pressed a red button. A pair of underpants slapped his face. "We need backup," he grunted. They called Mayor Pickle the parrot, who only spoke in rhymes. "If pants are flying through the sky, someone's laundry's way too high," he cawed. He flew over in a tiny helicopter made of cheese. "To save this town, you'll need to bounce and give that launcher a giant pounce." Bobby had an idea. "Let's use Luna's trampoline." They dragged the giant trampoline to the launcher. Bobby put on 2 pairs of underpants, one for luck, one for flying, and bounced high into the sky. "Banana thunder!" he screamed, crashing onto the control panel. Sparks flew, and the machine stopped. Everyone held their breath. One last pair of underwear floated gently down. It landed on Mayor Pickle's head. "I declare this mess hilariously done," he rhymed. The town cheered. Luna sang. Milo ate a victory banana. And Bobby? He posed like a superhero in his flying underpants. Mission underwear complete. That night, Wiggleberry threw the first ever pants parade. Everyone wore their funniest, fluffiest underwear on their heads. Luna performed her new song, The Ballad of Bobby's Bottoms. Even Miss Daisy danced, holding teacups and undies in both hooves. Bobby was crowned Pants Hero of the Year. But just as Bobby was about to sleep, knock, knock, Milo burst in. "Bobby, bad news. I accidentally built a sock cannon in my sleep." Bobby groaned. "Not again." They looked out the window and saw socks flying across the sky like shooting stars. "Welp," Bobby sighed, putting underpants on his head again. Time to save Wiggleberry. Again. In a quiet little village, where clouds often hugged the rooftops and the wind whispered secrets through the trees, there lived a boy named Elias, who always held on to a single red balloon. It wasn't just any balloon. It was the last gift his mother had given him before she fell too ill to speak. The balloon had once been bright and full of life, dancing in the wind like Elias's laughter. But now it sagged a little, tired from time and sorrow. Still, Elias carried it with him wherever he went, believing that as long as the balloon stayed with him, a part of his mother did too. The villagers had grown used to seeing him walk slowly through the fields or sit by the edge of the river, the red balloon bobbing gently beside him like a fading memory. Some smiled softly, others looked away, unsure of what to say to a child whose eyes held more silence than a room with no echoes. Elias didn't speak much anymore. He had once been full of questions about stars and seasons and how honeybees danced. But since his mother had closed her eyes that final time, the world felt too loud and too quiet all at once. The only time he smiled was when the balloon caught a breeze and fluttered, almost like it was waving at him. He liked to imagine it was her saying hello. At school, he was the boy with the balloon. Other children would ask, "Why don't you let it go?" But Elias would only shake his head. "She gave it to me," he would whisper, as if any louder would break something inside him. He stopped playing tag. He stopped laughing during story time. Even during recess, he would sit under the old tree in the corner of the playground, gently holding the balloon's string, as though it were made of spider silk and dreams. His father worked long hours at the bakery, kneading dough and pretending he wasn't kneading the ache in his chest too. He loved Elias deeply, but sometimes he didn't know how to reach through the boy's quiet, or what to say to a child who clung to a piece of the past like it was air itself. He tried making Elias pancakes with smiley faces and cutting his sandwiches into stars, but nothing could pull the boy back to the brightness he once carried. So, each night, they would sit together in silence at the dinner table, one chair forever empty, one balloon always present. One autumn evening, the village hosted its annual lantern festival. It was a night when everyone lit little paper lanterns and released them into the sky, letting go of something heavy to make space for something new. Elias didn't want to go at first. He didn't like the idea of letting go. But his teacher had gently asked him, "What if your balloon wants to see the stars tonight?" And that thought stuck. As the moment came for the lanterns to rise, people whispered wishes into their paper shells. Elias stood still. He looked at the balloon, now even dimmer than before, and felt a sting behind his eyes. "If I let you go," he whispered, "will she still hear me when I talk to her?" The balloon didn't answer, of course, but a gentle wind brushed his cheek, almost like a kiss. With trembling hands, Elias lifted the balloon high, his heart squeezing tight. "Goodbye, Mama," he said, barely louder than a breath. Then slowly he released the string. The balloon didn't soar like the lanterns. It wobbled, tired and worn, as if unsure whether to rise or rest. For a moment, Elias thought it might fall, but then a current of wind swept through the square, lifting the balloon higher, higher, until it blended into the night sky. He watched it until it disappeared behind a star. Around him, lanterns floated like wishes with wings, and for the first time in a long while, Elias felt so at the edge of a forgotten park where weeds crept through cracks in the pavement, and the merry-go-round never turned anymore. There was an old metal swing that always swayed slightly, even when the wind stood still. And on that swing, almost every afternoon as the sun dipped behind the crooked trees, sat a small girl named Mira. She was the kind of child who wore socks that didn't match and kept stories folded like paper cranes inside her pockets. But recently, her pockets had stayed empty, and her eyes had started to look like puddles after the rain, deep, reflective, and quiet. No one saw her laugh anymore, and even fewer remembered the sound of her voice. She just sat, gently swinging back and forth, staring at the swing beside her, the one that remained empty, though it hadn't always been. That second swing had once been filled with music, the kind that came from giggles and shouts and shared secrets between sisters. Mira and her older sister Amaya used to spend ever. At the edge of a forgotten park where weeds crept through cracks in the pavement and the merry-go-round never turned anymore, there was an old metal swing that always swayed slightly, even when the wind stood still. And on that swing, almost every afternoon as the sun dipped behind the crooked trees, sat a small girl named Mira. She was the kind of child who wore socks that didn't match and kept stories folded like paper cranes inside her pockets. But recently, her pockets had stayed empty, and her eyes had started to look like puddles after the rain, deep, reflective, and quiet. No one saw her laugh anymore, and even fewer remembered the sound of her voice. She just sat, gently swinging back and forth, staring at the swing beside her, the one that remained empty, though it hadn't always been. That second swing had once been filled with music, the kind that came from giggles and shouts and shared secrets between sisters. Mira and her older sister Amaya used to spend ever. One afternoon, when the sky had been painted in perfect gold and Mira's hands were sticky from melting ice cream, Amaya had coughed once, then twice, then more. It had seemed small, unimportant, just a tickle in the throat. But days passed, and the cough stayed, growing deeper, more tired. Their mother said it was just a cold. Then she said maybe it was the flu. Then, doctors with clipboards and serious faces began visiting. Mira hated those days. The house became quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet, more like the heavy kind that clings to your shoulders. And one morning, Amaya didn't get out of bed. That was the first day Mira went to the swing alone. Now, the park felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories too big for Mira's heart. The laughter still echoed faintly in her ears, the kind that only she could hear. Sometimes she would talk out loud, pretending Amaya was still swinging beside her. "You'd beat me today," she'd whisper. "I didn't have breakfast again." Her parents tried to help, but they were grieving too. Her mother cried into laundry. Her father fixed things that weren't broken. They tried to smile when Mira was around, but children are smart in the way adults forget. They can feel the truth behind forced grins. Her room, once full of bedtime stories read by Amaya's silly voices, now felt like a museum of moments she wasn't ready to pack away. Mira kept a photo of them, taped above her bed, both girls on the swing, cheeks pressed together, eyes squinting in the sun, joy bursting from their smiles like fireworks. She'd trace the edges of the picture at night and whisper, "If you're on a star, can you see me?" One rainy day, Mira arrived at the park with a soggy sandwich and a drawing she'd made in school. She sat on the swing and held up the drawing, two stick figures with matching hair and wings. One stood on a swing, the other floated above with a glowing heart. She taped it to the swing next to hers, letting it flap in the. A stranger passed by, a woman walking her dog, and paused, watching Mira with gentle eyes. She didn't ask questions, didn't interrupt, just gave a small wave. Mira waved back. It was the first time she'd done that in weeks. The woman smiled and continued walking, but that wave stayed with Mira. It reminded her that the world still existed beyond the swing set. And maybe, just maybe, one day she'd feel brave enough to step back into it. When Mira left the park that evening, she glanced over her shoulder. The taped drawing was still there, and for a moment, the empty swing beside it moved just a little more than usual, like someone had just jumped off, mid-flight. She smiled, barely, but it was real. And that night, before bed, she whispered to the photo above her bed, "You don't have to swing every day, but thank you for visiting." Every night before bed, Jonah would sit by his window and wait for the stars. He didn't ask for a lot, just one, maybe two, enough to make a wish upon. It had been a ritual ever since he was 5 when his grandmother told him, "The stars listen to quiet hearts. If you sit still, they'll hear you better." For a long time it seemed to work. The stars always came, blinking gently like they were nodding at him. And Jonah would close his eyes, whisper a little wish, and climb into bed believing that something, somewhere, was listening. But lately, the stars had stopped showing up. The sky remained cloudy or blank, just a gray stretch of nothing outside his window. And with the stars gone, so were his wishes. Jonah had lost his mother 3 months ago, though no one in his house said the word lost. They said she was gone, or past, or at peace, as if she had gently walked into another room and forgotten to come back. But Jonah knew better. He had seen her slippers still by tea. His father was different now, too. Not bad, just quiet, like a house where only some of the lights worked. He still packed Jonah's lunch and walked him to school, but he no longer told silly jokes or danced to the old radio songs. Sometimes he'd forget to shave, or he'd stare too long at nothing. Once Jonah found him sitting on the floor in the closet, holding her scarf. They didn't talk about it. No one talked about anything anymore. They just did things. Like robots powered by sadness. At school, Jonah's teacher, Miss Cleary, was kind but careful. She always asked, "Are you okay today, Jonah?" but never pressed further. He didn't know how to answer anyway. He was okay in some ways. His shoes still fit. His math homework still made sense. But in other ways, he wasn't okay at all. The lunchroom was the worst. That was where he used to sit with his mom's lunch notes tucked inside his sandwich bag, usually saying things like, "You're my hero," or "Eat your grapes and grow strong." The window became his place. After homework, after brushing his teeth, he would kneel on the small cushion his mom had sewn, blue with tiny stars, and rest his chin on the windowsill. He didn't even expect the stars to come anymore. He just sat because it felt like the one place where maybe, just maybe, the world would remember to send a sign. Sometimes he'd whisper things like, "I miss you," or "Are you still listening?" into the sky, not knowing who he was talking to, maybe the stars, maybe her. One night, after yet another evening of blank skies, Jonah stayed a little longer. The window pane was cold against his fingers, but he didn't mind. He watched the branches sway outside and the shadow of the old oak tree stretch across the yard like a sleeping giant. Then, something small and strange happened. A light flickered, not in the sky, but from across the street. Mrs. Edna, the elderly woman who lived alone with a dozen cats, had placed a small glowing lamp in her window. It was. The next night, the lamp glowed again, and again the night after that. Jonah began waving to it softly, unsure if anyone noticed. Then, one evening, as he was about to leave the window, a soft knock came at the door. His father answered, and Jonah heard muffled voices. Moments later, his father called, "Jonah, someone left something for you." On the front porch was a note and a box. The note read, "Even when the stars are gone, we can make our own light for the quiet hearts." Inside was a small star-shaped night lamp. Jonah carried it to his room and placed it beside the window. That night, he turned it on, sat down, and for the first time since his mother had left, whispered a wish, not for her to come back, but for the strength to remember her without it hurting so much. The lamp glowed gently, not blinking like real stars, but steady and warm. He imagined his mother sitting beside him, smiling, brushing his hair back like she used to. "You're doing okay," he thought Shemig. Outside, the sky remained dark, but Jonah didn't feel quite so small anymore. He still missed her. That hadn't changed. But now he understood something he hadn't before. Sometimes the stars don't show up, and that's okay, because love doesn't only live in the sky. It can live in lamps and notes and old scarves, and even in the quiet hearts of children who keep hoping anyway. The rain had been falling since morning, not hard or angry, but soft and steady, like a lullaby the sky couldn't stop singing. It pattered gently on rooftops, danced across puddles, and trickled down windows like slow-moving tears. In the middle of it all, on the corner of Maple and Pine Street, a small child named Rosie stood under a tree that didn't do much to keep her dry. Her shoes were soaked, her red coat stuck to her arms, and her hands trembled, not from cold, but from something much deeper. In her arms she held a teddy bear, worn and soggy, its one button eye hanging by a thread. His name was Mr. Snuggles, and he had been with Rosie through every scraped knee, every scary night, and every bedtime story whispered in the dark. But today wasn't like other days. Today, Rosie was saying goodbye. It had been a week since her parents' voices had gone quiet in the house, since the arguing had stopped and her mother's suitcase had appeared by the door. Rosie remembered the morning her mom bent down, eyes swollen from crying, and whispered, "I'll come back soon, sweet pea, I promise." Then she was gone. No goodbyes with pancakes or hugs that smelled like vanilla lotion. Just gone. Her dad tried to smile after that, but Rosie could see the cracks in it. He'd forget to pack her snack, miss bedtime stories, and sometimes cry when he thought she wasn't looking. He tried, really tried, but Rosie missed her mother like the sky misses the sun on rainy days. Every day after school, Rosie would go to the same tree and wait, just in case. Mr. Snuggles always came too, his belly damp from being tucked under Rosie's coat. She'd watch cars go by and imagine one of them stopping, the door opening, and her mother stepping out with arms wide and the same worn smile. But the cars never stopped. The door never opened. And today, Rosie had decided she couldn't wait forever. "I think maybe she's not coming," she whispered into Mr. Snuggles' ear, her voice cracking like glass. "And it hurts too much to keep hoping." She looked at him, soaked and floppy, the bear that had listened to every tear and kept every secret. "So I'm going to let you stay here. In case she comes back and looks for me, you'll be here to tell her I waited." She gently placed Mr. Snuggles at the base of the tree, brushing off a few wet leaves as if that would make it more comfortable. The bear slumped over, head tilted, looking more like a lost thing than ever. Rosie stared at him, her breath coming in short gasps. Her hands clenched into tiny fists at her sides. Her heart screamed to take him back, to not leave him alone in the rain. But a part of her, the tired, aching part, believed that letting go might hurt less than holding on. From across the street, Mrs. Fletcher, the elderly neighbor who always waved from her porch, had seen Rosie standing there. She knew something was wrong. Anyone who looked closely could tell. She slowly made her way across the street, umbrella in hand, and stood beside the child without speaking. After a moment, Rosie looked up at her, eyes red and wide. "She's not coming back," Rosie said, the words barely louder than the rain. I waited. Mrs. Fletcher nodded, not arguing, not trying to explain away things with grown-up words. "Sometimes," she said gently, "people leave even when they love you very much. It doesn't mean they didn't want to stay. It just means they couldn't." Rosie's lip trembled. "It hurts too much." "I know, darling," Mrs. Fletcher said, placing a warm hand on her shoulder. "But love isn't gone just because someone is. It stays in the things they left behind, in memories, in the smell of pancakes, in bedtime stories, and in teddy bears." Rosie looked back at Mr. Snuggles. The rain had soaked into his fur, and he looked so small now. She bent down, picked him up, and hugged him tightly. Maybe he could still be her messenger. Maybe he didn't have to stay under the tree to prove she had waited. Mrs. Fletcher opened her umbrella wider and offered Rosie a side. "Come on," she said. "Let's go and make some tea." As they walked back across the street, Rosie looked back once, expecting to feel regret. But instead, she felt something else. Like maybe she didn't have to carry all her sadness alone. Maybe she could let someone help her hold it. That night, Rosie placed Mr. Snuggles beside her pillow, drying him gently with her softest towel. She whispered, "She still hasn't come, but I'll tell you all about today." And as she spoke, the rain outside softened, the wind quieted. And for the first time in a long while, Rosie fell asleep without waiting for headlights in the driveway. Max had always loved birthdays, not just his own, but anyone's. His classmates, his cousins, even the neighbor's dog once got a party, and Max had made a paper hat just for him. He loved the streamers, the noise of laughter, the candles flickering while everyone sang out of tune. But most of all, he loved balloons. Big ones, small ones, shiny ones that floated to the ceiling, or the squeaky, rubbery kind that stuck to walls when you rubbed them on your hair. They made the world feel lighter, like anything could float. But this birthday was different. This birthday had no balloons, no candles, no cake, no guests, just silence. He turned 8 on a Tuesday. His mom always said Tuesdays were good luck days, but this one didn't feel lucky at all. The sky was gray, the hallway was cold, and the only sound in the house was the soft hum of the refrigerator. His mom had been gone for almost a month. She hadn't meant to go. Max knew that. She had been sick for a long time, sleeping. Max's dad was trying. Max could tell. He still packed lunches, though sometimes he forgot to put anything sweet in them. He still washed clothes, though his shirts now smelled like soap and not like her. He still sat beside Max at night and read old bedtime stories, though sometimes he stopped mid-sentence and just stared out the window. Max would listen to the silence and say, "It's okay, Dad," even when it wasn't. That morning, Max woke up hoping, just a tiny bit, that maybe something would feel like a birthday. He tiptoed into the kitchen. No streamers, no wrapped presents, just a bowl of cereal on the counter and a note in his dad's messy handwriting. "Happy birthday, buddy. I'll be home early. Love you." Max stared at it for a long time. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't enough. Not for a heart that still missed soft lullabies and the way his mom would make pancakes in the shape of dinosaurs. Not for a boy who used to count down to his birthday a whole month ahead. At school, no one remembered. Or if they did, they didn't say anything. Max didn't tell them. What was the point? He didn't want a pity party. He didn't want them to look at him like he was broken. So he just sat quietly, ate his lunch alone, and drew balloon animals in his notebook. Ones that didn't pop, ones that stayed. When the teacher asked everyone to write a story about your favorite birthday, Max stared at his paper for 10 minutes before writing. It hasn't happened yet. And then he underlined it twice. After school, it rained. Not a downpour, just that light, drizzly kind of rain that makes the world feel blurrier. Max walked home slowly, splashing through puddles like he used to when his mom would let him wear his dinosaur boots. He didn't feel like being fast. There was nothing waiting at home except quiet. But when he opened the door, something small had changed. On the kitchen table was a single cupcake, chocolate with blue icing, a little lopsided, and a balloon tied to a mug filled with pencils. The balloon was yellow and said "Congratulations" instead of "Happy Birthday." But Max didn't care. He touched it gently, the rubber squeaking under his fingers. A folded card sat beside it. He opened it, and inside was a hand-drawn picture. Him, his dad, and a woman with curly hair and stars above her head. It wasn't perfect, but it was them. The message read, "Your mom always said birthdays are for remembering how much we're loved. I love you. So did she. Always." Max felt the tears come, but he didn't fight them. He sat down, took a bite of the cupcake, and let the sugar and sadness mix in his mouth. He looked at the balloon, swaying gently with the ceiling fan, and whispered, "I miss you." The balloon didn't answer. Balloons never do. But it stayed. And somehow, that was every morning at exactly 7:45 a.m., before the school bell rang and before the playground filled with bouncing backpacks and echoing voices, a boy named Leo would sit on a wooden bench beside the school's front gate. The bench wasn't new. It creaked when you sat on it, and one of its legs was shorter than the others, so it rocked slightly. But Leo liked it that way. He liked the way it tilted just enough to remind him that nothing had to be perfect to feel okay. That bench had become his place, a quiet space in a world that had suddenly grown much too loud and too empty all at once. Every day, he waited there for the person who used to walk through that gate at exactly 7:46. That person was his older sister, Ava. Ava had been everything Leo wanted to be when he grew up. She was smart, funny, brave, and knew the names of every constellation. When he was afraid of thunder, she'd tell him thunder was just the sky burping after a big meal of clouds. When he had nightmare, but one afternoon, a phone call changed everything. There had been an accident. Leo didn't understand it at first. Grown-ups talked in hushed tones. The TV was turned off. Meals were skipped, and Ava didn't come home that day, or the next, or ever again. They told him gently as anyone can tell a child that someone they love has gone forever. Leo didn't cry right away. It took days for the tears to find their way out, and once they started, they didn't stop. His chest hurt in places he didn't know could ache. The house was quieter, like even the walls knew something was missing. But still, he kept going to school, and he kept sitting on the bench. At first, he thought maybe if he waited there long enough, Ava would come back. She'd be late, maybe, but she'd still walk through the gate, backpack bouncing, laughing about tripping over her own shoelaces. But she never came. People walked past him, teachers, classmates, parents, and some gave him sympathetic smiles. Every morning, Leo whispered something to that bench, pretending it was listening. "Ava, I still saved you a spot." Or, "Guess what? I got a B+ on the science quiz." Once he told the bench about the time he tripped in gym and landed face first in a pile of beanbags. It wasn't funny then, but it made him laugh when he told Ava. Even if she couldn't hear him, it helped to pretend. It helped to remember the sound of her laugh and the way she used to poke his side when he pouted. His teacher, Mrs. Klein, eventually noticed. One day, she brought him a small notebook and said gently, "Sometimes, when it hurts too much to say things out loud, it helps to write them down." Leo nodded, even though he didn't know what he'd write. But that night, he opened the notebook and wrote, "Dear Ava, today I sat on the bench. I waited for you. It's been 43 days. I miss you every single one of them." From then on, he wrote something every day. His dad tried to be strong, but Leo could see through it. He saw the way his dad lingered outside Ava's room, how he folded her clothes slowly, how he still set 3 plates at dinner by mistake. They were both learning how to breathe through the quiet. One evening, Leo showed him the notebook. They read it together. They cried together. That night, for the first time in a long time, they told Ava stories aloud, not to each other, but to the ceiling, as if maybe the stars were listening. One morning, after many weeks, Leo walked to the bench and found something strange. A tiny paper star sat on the seat, carefully folded, with Ava's name written on it. He looked around, confused. No one was nearby. He opened it, and inside, in careful handwriting, it said, "She was kind. We all miss her." There was no name, just that small star. He tucked it into his notebook. The next day, there were 3 stars. By the end of the week, there were over 20, each with a different message. Some said, "She helped me with math," or "She made me laugh when I was new," or simply, "Thank you, Ava." Leo didn't know who was leaving them, but every morning he arrived to find more stars, more memories, more tiny pieces of her still alive in the people she had touched. Eventually, the school principal allowed him to decorate the bench. He painted it sky blue and drew constellations across the backrest, the ones Ava loved most. He called it Ava's Bench, and people began leaving notes and paper stars for weeks, even months. Leo still sat there every morning, not because he believed she would come back, but because he knew she had never really left. Not completely. Love, he realized, isn't just in people. It's in their stories, their laughter, their stars. In a small, quiet bedroom at the end of a narrow hallway, where the wallpaper peeled slightly at the edges and the nightlight flickered softly like a blinking eye, there sat a pair of tiny red shoes tucked carefully beneath the bed. They were polished once with little buckles that clicked when the wearer walked. And they had seen birthday parties, muddy playgrounds, grocery store adventures, and quiet bedtime stories read with a flashlight under the covers. But now the shoes sat untouched, collecting a faint layer of dust, their bright color beginning to fade like memories do when no one speaks them aloud. The room they belonged to had been locked for weeks. The door wasn't shut out of anger, but out of grief, like a pause button pressed too hard and forgotten. The shoes belonged to Ellie, a 6-year-old girl with curly hair that bounced like springs and a laugh so loud it made birds fly from the trees. She had loved those shoes more than anything, even more tea. Then one day, the dreams stopped. It started as a small fever. Nothing alarming. Kids got sick all the time. But Ellie's cheeks burned like fire, and her laughter turned into soft whimpers in the middle of the night. Her parents took her to the hospital, and Sam wasn't allowed to go with them. He stood by the window, clutching her blanket, watching the taillights disappear down the road. The house felt wrong without her. Too still, too silent. No one told Sam much, just that she needed rest, that she was in good hands, that she'd be home soon. But the days passed, and she didn't come back. And then, one rainy afternoon, their father returned with empty arms and eyes so red they looked painful to blink. Ellie wasn't coming home. There was no announcement, no music, no visitors that day. Just 3 people sitting in different rooms, trying to understand how the world could keep moving while theirs had stopped. Sam went to her room that night and sat on the floor. Eventually, their parents closed the door, thinking it would help. They said things like, "It's too hard," and "Let's just give it time." But Sam couldn't forget. He couldn't unsee the shoes. Every night, he passed her door on the way to his own room and felt like something was missing. Not just Ellie, but a part of himself too. He started drawing her picture every day after school. Stick figures at first, then ones with curls and red shoes and capes made of blankets. He made a scrapbook and hid it under his bed. "It's like talking to her," he told himself. "Like she can still see me." One evening, he overheard his parents whispering in the kitchen. They were talking about cleaning out her room, giving her clothes to charity, donating her toys. His heart thudded so loudly he was sure they could hear it. That night, he snuck into her room and curled up on her bed, hugging her pillow. The scent of strawberry shampoo was still faint in the fabric. Don't let them teat. When his parents entered the room the next morning and found him asleep, the blanket wrapped around him like a cocoon, they didn't say anything. They sat beside him, one on each side, and for the first time in weeks, they cried together. Sam didn't wipe his tears. He let them fall onto the shoes, onto the floor, into the silence that finally broke open like a dam that had waited too long. From that day on, they made a new rule. No one would throw anything away. Instead, they'd celebrate Ellie each week in a small way. Every Friday, they'd come into her room and read her favorite books out loud, even if no one was there to listen. They'd leave drawings on her desk, tell her about their week, and talk like she was still in the next room. Sam placed the shoes on the windowsill so they could see the world, as Ellie would have said. "They don't like the dark," he explained. "They belong in the light." One Friday, Sam brought a new drawing. It showed Ellie in her red shoes. The shoes never moved. They never glowed or gave signs of magic. But in their stillness, they reminded the family to keep remembering, to speak her name, to laugh when they missed her, to love a little louder, and to believe, just a little, that maybe, somewhere, she was still running fast, still wearing her red shoes, still flying in dreams. On the top shelf of the coat closet, hidden behind a box of old scarves and a forgotten umbrella, sat a small lunchbox with faded stickers peeling off its sides. The latch was slightly rusted, the handle wobbly, but the name Noah was still clear on the front, written in bold blue marker with a star drawn beside it. No one had touched it in months. It just sat there, untouched, like a ghost of a routine that used to mean something. The lunchbox had once been filled every morning. Peanut butter sandwiches cut into dinosaur shapes, apples with the skin carved into hearts. Little notes written in colorful pens that said things like, "You are braver than a lion," or "Smile, you make the world better." Now it sat cold and empty, preserved like a memory someone was too afraid to disturb. Noah had been 7 the last time he used that lunchbox. 7, with big eyes and a laugh that made his teacher chuckle from across the classroom. He had a best friend named Jonah, and they. Then one morning, he didn't feel like saluting. His head hurt. He was tired. "Maybe it's just a cold," his mother said, placing a hand on his forehead. But the fever didn't go away, and neither did the bruises on his arms or the strange aching in his legs. After several doctor visits, long hallways that smelled like bleach, and too many blood tests, The word came, leukemia. Noah couldn't pronounce it at first. He called it the bad bug and asked if he could take extra soup to kill it. But it wasn't that simple. Days turned into weeks of hospital stays, medicine that made his hair fall out, and nights when his mother cried quietly into her scarf so he wouldn't hear. He tried to be strong, braver than the lion she always said he was. He cracked jokes for the nurses. He gave names. Noah had been 7 the last time he used that lunchbox. 7, with big eyes and a laugh that made his teacher chuckle from across the classroom. He had a best friend named Jonah, and they